Good afternoon and welcome to the Ōtorohanga Community Board meeting for June. Joe is happy to do our opening and our closing today, so I'll hand it over to Joe.
Kia ora all, and welcome. From a quote book, Swing High, Life Lessons from Childhood. Listen in order to persuade. Unlike the eyes, which are almost adult size from birth, the ears never stop growing. Maybe this is why children aren't very good at listening. Does the ability to listen come with age as our ears grow? Unfortunately not. Listening is a rare skill, but it can be developed. Listen to others to increase your influence. The best way to persuade people is with your ears, by listening to them, by Dean Rusk.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah. Moving on to apologies. We've got an apology from Kat, and I'm pretty sure we've got one from Tori too. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Pete and Steve, thank you. We've got no one in public forum. We don't have any late items, do we? No. Does anyone have a conflict of interest that they need to declare? No. And then confirmation of our minutes for April. Can I have a mover and a seconder for those? Kate and Joe, thank you. And then moving on to our reports. Item 38, Ōtorohanga Community Metered Water Charges. Brendan, welcome to the hot seat.
Thank you. I probably should have just sit up here straight away, I guess.
Yeah.
I'll take the report as read. So basically, the point of this report is to give you the opportunity to make a recommendation to council as to what you think the water meter charges should be set at for the next 12 months. I've obviously put in there a recommendation based on the income requirements and my best guess as to the best balancing act between increasing the fixed charge too much and increasing the consumption charge too much. But obviously it is up to you to discuss and make a recommendation. I've just given you a starting point, I guess. So happy to take any questions.
Cool, thanks, Brendan. So I'll open it up to the floor for questions. Does anyone have any questions? Steve, thanks.
Brendan, I mean, this was brought up in a previous meeting today, but I've just been concerned about the percentage increases of these, considering we had one last year, and I understand the reasoning behind it because of the deficits in the accounts, but it's, as you know, it's pretty tough out there. And I mentioned this earlier on, so this is my main concern about increases of this magnitude every year. It seems to be, and I'm just do we really have to increase these prices? Do we have to? I know it's aligns with the LTP.
Yep.
But in saying that, we are more than entitled to make amendments to the LTP through the special consultative procedure, which we can, if it can goes down that path. But I'm just sort of loath. I mean, everything's going up, but we're up for a big rates increase this year as well. So you can see where I'm coming from with this, and I know what other people say. They're going up in arms. I mean, so really, I don't know the answer here, but it's sort of something I'll lean to the fact that today I just wouldn't want to make a decision on this, or recommend that it go forward at that rate. Right. Perhaps something more I'll put this, something along the lines of more of a CPI increase rather than a thing would go down better than a full-on 16.5%. and 12.5% between fixed charges and I think I don't know. Yeah, that's the answer or not.
Yeah, so I guess in response to the question, can we go with less? Obviously, you as a board could recommend whatever you want. The 1,086,000 and whatever figure, that was what was based on the LTP, but that is based on covering the costs. So I was just looking at it just before, just double check out the right figures. So the total cost of running the water scheme for Ōtorohanga community is about $1.3 million. So of that, $1 million's coming from, or just under 1.1 million's coming from charges based on what's in the budget. It's 125,000 coming from general rates across the district. So district people are contributing as well. And then the rest of it is coming from various other minor, connection fees and all that sort of stuff. I guess the one thing to point out is that 125,000 of general rates will disappear when the three water reforms happens, regardless of which way we go. So at that point, you're going to have to increase the fees to get that in as well. So you're probably talking another 10% increase there at that time, which will be in a couple of years' time. So I guess that's a way of saying a lesser increase now probably leads to a bigger increase in the future is the issue. And I know it's a timing thing because obviously now is not a good time to be putting big increases on people. I think it is.
So with the local water done well proposition that's before us, we will be transferring the debt as well from us to. Yes, so it's then that's done and that's spread over all of. I think all the other councils will be in the same position. Any debt that water would go into the CCO.
Mhm.
That will be spread out. They've got a bit of borrowing capacity and everything else. Can we to hold off till that time comes and then transfer all of that over rather than having these big increases before we potentially go to that CCO? I mean, can we? What I'm saying is, can we defer it so that at the moment our consumers are not wearing a big cost like this at the moment?
So I guess I mean to that point, obviously council hasn't made a decision yet as to where we're going. If we were to go down that path, I believe the agreements for the entity is that it will be ring-fenced to just our ratepayers for the first few years anyway. So even if we transfer, there'll be a massive jump when the new entity takes over. If we retain it in-house, if council goes down that path instead, we would have to have that massive increase in any way. We wouldn't obviously have the ability to spread it over other communities. So either way, as I understand it, you'll probably have that big, our ratepayers will have that big increase regardless. It's just the extent of that increase, I guess, depending on which option it's gone with.
I think we're between a rock and a hard place in a way, because we're having to explain to the ratepayers, because they'll come to us to say, why is this massive? I mean, Katrina made a point to me before the meeting that we don't know the exact breakdown of the costs within your water department. So it's easy for me to say, nah. I'm not thinking, but I don't have all the figures before me to say, okay, your chlorine costs and your vehicle running costs and vehicle So I don't have that breakdown. So you tell me it's $1,086,000 or $86,000. Well, I don't know what it consists of. So are you able to cut some costs within that? Look, I don't know because I don't have those figures.
So Katrina did send an email last night, I think it was, saying that question was probably going to come up if no one else did. She would raise it. So I have actually got over there some printouts of the breakdown of the costs for the last full year, this year's budget and estimated actuals, and then what we're projecting for next year. It's not quite down to the level of chlorine and that sort of stuff. It's probably the next level up to activity operations, asset maintenance. So I can hand that round. I don't know if you want it now to have a look at it before we continue, or I do it. It's just like Jared. Thank you. So in terms of the costs, we'll pass that round. If you want to have a look at that first before we keep going, or go with other questions and then come back to that, or I'll leave it up to Chair?
Have you got any more questions, Steve? Okay. Did you want to read this first, Joe, or do you want to?
Through you, Chair, Brendan, I agree a lot with what Steve has just said.
Yep.
It's come at a really horrible time.
Yes.
You know, interest rates have only just started to go down, and a lot of people in the community are won't even really have recouped on that yet, let alone get up to speed with just everyday life expenses.
Yes.
So I'm on the case of, or on the side of deferring for at least a decision for one more year, or I'd really like to, until Waikato Water done well, if that's the way we decide to go. We have more information of what costs it really is going to be after they take on our debt as well.
Yep.
So I know it's going to go up because it's an external entity, and that's what seems to always happen. And I do agree with you that it will have to increase slightly, but a year after we just decided to increase. I know I pay as a landlord already for some of my tenants' water, because the fixed charge is getting a bit out of hand, especially rurally. Maybe not if you're a big, huge farmer, I'm not sure. But as a lifestyle block, which there's quite a lot of them out there now, it's 3 times what I use, the fixed charge, every 6 months. And but you know, a lot of my tenants, I choose to do that. I understand that, but it's a big, huge cost. Is it? I don't know. Sometimes some of them may need education about how much water they do use. But I just think it's a bit wrong timing, just only a year after you've put both the fixed charge rate and the cubic rate up. So to have a real decision for me today, I'd be saying no straight away. Because I haven't read this and I need time to digest what you've just given out. So I'd like to defer even making a decision till next month, but I don't know if that's possible. But yeah, I'm not for raising that right now here, because just the light of the economic situation. It's great the rates have gone down and people are maybe having a bit more in their pocket each week after their mortgage or their rent. Some rents have gone down, you know, things like that. And then you just go and hike after 1 year is what I really struggle to come to terms with. Yeah.
Hey, you got any questions? No, Mike.
Yeah, ditto. And the trouble is there's no easy answer here. It's I think the phrase rock and a hard place has been used probably twice here already. If we were to say yes now, there will be people knocking on our doors and ringing, and that's what we signed up for. That is what we signed up for. We just don't know what the answers would be. If we were to say no now and defer it for a year, and then all of a sudden there's a massive increase and people are really hurting at double this time next year, well, I won't be getting my phone number wrong because I'm going to be here, but everybody else will. And do either of those outcomes ideal? And the answer to that is no. It would be nice to have a bit of time to be able to go through this, but I'm not sure that that's actually going to answer all our questions. It's
Possibly.
to know, but I don't know that it's going to answer our questions.
Yes, and unfortunately, because I was in a risk and assurance meeting all day today, I didn't get a chance to get that tender until just now. So I would have said that earlier had I had the chance. Sorry.
Bearing in mind that we can look through this and actually, although it informs us as to what's going on, we are not in a position to be able to say, hey, that looks a bit high, and can you use Steve Singer's chlorine? You know, we will know the figures, but that doesn't mean to say we will know.
Yeah,
ditto.
Just just to kind of cover off some of the things that Brendan said. So council is due at the June meeting. That's the next meeting to adopt our rates for the 25-26 financial year. So if the board, if the recommendation from the board is not to increase charges, council still has the power to override that as long as the board understands that.
We understand that, Grant. Yeah, we totally understand that. Have you got something else, Joe?
Just quickly here, down the bottom, I saw one thing that really stood out to me was the leak detection program.
Yep.
You've got 0 as actuals, budget 50 for the 24-25 year. Admittedly, it hasn't jumped up much, $1,250 for the 25-26 year.
Yeah.
After the estimated for the 24-25 year was 50 grand, the same again.
Mhm.
Now, I understand, and I could be wrong, that we've done a big lot of detection and worked out a lot of what were the leaks.
Yeah.
And saying that, I don't know how many I've called in. Some of them have been on the road, the leaks. Some of them have been on people's driveways, things like that. So, are you any closer to nearing to cutting that in half? I know it's not big, but yeah, where are you at with the leaks that seem to be one of the biggest problems in the past?
Probably more Mark question to answer around that.
So that leak detection program, we did that work last year. And we didn't use that amount of funding. So we've actually knocked those leaks back. I think I'll probably go in a second. I think we've gone down from about a 40% water loss in 23-24 to sitting around 23% now. We haven't done the annual sort of calculations yet, but I got the team to do a sort of snapshot today, and I think it was 23%. So we've done a lot of work in that space and definitely improved on our water loss. So yeah, it's sitting at 23%. So that's not quite half, but it's definitely heading in the right direction. You're not going to get much more than maybe 20%. So there's always going to be an element of loss in the network. And then you get into that phase of law of diminishing returns. How much more do you invest to try and get that last bit? So yeah, so we put quite a sizable budget in the LTP for leak detection for Ōtorohanga and Waipaha Rural. We didn't use that in the end. We got it done a different way, considerably cheaper. So that's probably
It's very last line.
yeah. So I'm not sure. That hasn't yet. We haven't spent that.
No.
I understand. So it's just sitting across there.
So I guess the question is, do we need that budget in there next year?
I think there has to be an element of leak detection that goes on. But of course it's an operating budget.
Yeah.
So you don't have to spend the entirety of it, but if you don't have any budget, then you're spending unbudgeted money. So
yeah,
there's potential to lower that budget. But yeah, whether that's going to have so I think the good question here through you, Chair, is Brendan, what's driving the costs for next year? And I think part of that is the Taumata Harawai regulations and the Commerce Commission. So we probably haven't talked about that. Whether you want to talk, is that in the report?
I don't think I covered it specifically in the report. So yeah, Taumata Harawai and Commerce Commission, as part of the water reforms, we're required to now fund from the 1st of July 2025 the operations of what they do with regards to water. So for us, I think it's a total of about 40-something thousand across both, or was that just Taumata Harawai? Wow. About 13 or 14, yeah. So that's been spread across all the activities. that are water related, so stormwater across both communities, wastewater here in town, plus the water across both communities and the water schemes. So the cost for the Ōtorohanga is $25,000 all up across those two different entities with levies. That's actually included in the treatment plant figures under activity operations. And then that's the treatment plant costs are split 70-30 between the town supply and the Waipa rural supply because they're both supplied from the same plant. That 70-30 split is based on the basically the consumption or the usage as to where the raw treated water goes. The treated water that leaves the plant goes about 30% to the Waipa scheme, 60% is the town. So that's a historical figure that we've used. So that's how we split the costs of the treatment plant. So that's the line within my table, the treatment plant allocation one. So that 489 for next year is your share of the costs of running the treatment plant, and that's just the operating costs. And then the 851 is the cost of running the distribution network of the town. So Tamatawai has been put within the treatment plant because it more relates to the treatment side of things, not so much the distribution.
Through you, Chair, just briefly, and I don't know if I'm going to make any sense. I try to describe this because I'm doing it under pressure. And I don't know if I just wait, if I don't know, it's, well, like Graham said, unfortunately, we do have a decision, but we don't have a decision if the council just want to do what they want to do. But under the water treatment plant and the water supply, you've got, other than activity operations,
Yes.
you've got 4 other major ones, which I'm thinking activity operations cover wages, etc.
No.
No?
Activity
Okay.
operations is electricity, chemicals, things like mowing of the treatment plant, for example, sits under there.
Okay.
Those sort of things. So it's their day to day. There is some staff time in there. So it's not covering wages directly, but it is covering overheads from staff time.
Okay, so you don't applaud. I can't see any other big. Where would some of these big costs, where would the wages come in under?
So wages aren't in here directly.
I wondered that. Okay.
Yeah, they're an overhead that come from separate departments.
Okay, so then looking at both on the water treatment plant and the water supply.
Yep.
There's asset maintenance, depreciation, engineering, and finance and administration.
Yep.
They're quite big ones in there.
Yep.
Thinking of why, if we go with Waikato Water Done Well, is there anything we can defer or decrease in there and let it go over to Waikato Water Done Well, or if breaking down administration and finance and administration? Not sure exactly what some of the big indicators are in there. Interest, obviously you've got a loan on the water treatment plant.
Yep.
Right, okay. But yeah, looking at the asset maintenance, depreciation, and maybe engineering and the next 3 big ones in there, that I'm not sure whether there's any savings you can look at through them.
Through you, the chair. I think the question here is about good stewardship, and I don't think the discussion should be what we can defer and wait till it goes into the CCO, because bearing in mind the CCO will be council owned. So if every council takes the same position as let's defer, what sort of a state is the CCO going to be in when it first gets established? So I suppose the question in front of us today is, does the board want to recommend these changes? And I completely understand that you've just had this activity information put in front of you, but I've been through it, Brendan's been through it, there's not a lot of room in there to make savings, and we are making savings on the OPEX already. So it's I suppose the question is, it is not looking at an increase this year is going to increase it. And sorry, Brendan, have we talked about the deficit? So I think that probably needs to come out as well, because all we're going to do is push the can down the road further. So I think it's maybe you can talk about the deficit.
Yes.
If that's right through you.
Yeah, no, because once everyone had finished, that was going to be my first question. What is the deficit in that account?
Yes.
How much is it accumulating every year?
Yeah.
And like, where is it? But
So,
yeah,
I
I'm
haven't
not
put
very
in-
good with this sort of stuff,
Yeah,
but where is it in here?
I haven't reflected the deficit here. I was just putting the operating costs to make it as easy as possible. In terms of the deficit, so you may recall if you were in the workshops, one of the decisions that was made as part of the long-term plan was that for those water schemes, and this is before all the three waters, was after three waters or during three waters before local water done well, was that we would, for the town supplies and for town schemes and for CAFIA schemes, we would actually take a loan to completely obliterate those deficits back to zero for this year. And then extend that funds it over 25 years, as opposed to trying to reduce those deficits over a shorter period of time, which require putting the increases up. So we started the year with a deficit at zero. Based on the estimated actuals, we're looking at ending the year with a deficit of $250,000 for water. Last year, for the loan, the deficit was just over $1 million. It was about 770 the year before that. So the deficit does seem to increase by a couple $100,000 a year. Obviously, it fluctuates because part of the issue we have is that obviously a lot of the income is based on consumption. And if people use less water, then you get less income, and so therefore your deficit, assuming even if your expenses stay the same, you would actually get a deficit as you go. And this is obviously the issue that an entity is going to deal with, or we're going to have to deal with the ring fence things as well. So it's in one way, before we had meters, it was actually better because we had a fixed charge that everyone paid in their rates. So we had a fixed amount of income that we knew we were going to get. The issue we had was that usage would jump up, and so therefore your expenses would go up. So you still made a deficit, even though you're getting guaranteed income, because your expenses were too high because people didn't care about leaks, and you just had rampant issues that way. So by switching to the meters would fix that problem, but then it creates other issues. And it's unfortunately the nature of this sort of.
Brenda, I know it was in one of Katrina's questions in her email, just to look at the what other councils around the country are paying. Just a few examples to show that we're actually at the bottom end of the charging. When you make comparisons. So.
Yeah. So So did that answer the deficit question sufficiently, or did you have further?
Yeah,
on the deficit?
that is-
I mean, not sufficiently in that it's not a good answer, but
So
yeah.
So Brendan, just for clarity, so the reason the interest jumped was because of that loan to clear the deficit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see that online.
Yeah. And I guess the one thing I haven't put in here because it's not relevant to the discussion about the water charges is there is this third account, which is specifically the Ōtorohanga water supply loan. So the loan for the treatment plant sits within the treatment plant because that's funded across two different schemes. The loan for the water supply, so the distribution, is actually in a separate account because that's funded by rates across everyone in the community. So that's funded differently. So that doesn't need to be covered by these water charges. So I didn't include it here. So that's why it might look like there's no interest in the water supply account, but that's because it's separately. I should cover that off. Anything else on that, or did you want me to go on to some examples of what others are doing, or?
Yeah, carry on.
All right. Yeah, so this was something else that Katrina brought up in her email was about some sort of comparison. So what I did was I took similar rural small district councils. There's quite a range there. The fixed charges seem to range from South Taranaki has $150 for a less than 32 millimeter connection, but $260 if it's got a backflow on it. Which I don't know why they charge more if you've got a backflow than.
Is that because you got a tank?
Yeah, I guess so. And it goes right up to $1,400 for your fixed charge. But then the ones with higher things usually have a free allowance.
Really, like you can use so many cubes
Yeah.
before you get charged.
Yeah, but even some of those are like Bulla, for example, is $1,400 fixed charge, then it's $3.60 per cube over 400 cubes. Masterson's $331 per quarter for your fixed charge, and you can use up to 50 cubes a quarter. And then it's $2 for everything over that, up to 100 cubes, and then $2.60 over 100 cubes in a quarter. So some are really complex, which is random. Waitomo down the road, for example, is $856 fixed charge plus $3.94 per cube over 292 cubes per annum. So there's not too many that are down sitting where we are at the moment. Hauraki's 198 per fixed charge, so that's pretty close to what we're at. But they're $3.74 per cube up to 200, and then the more you use over that, it actually comes down. So you pay less as you use more water per cube. So yeah, so we're probably, as Graham said, we are probably sitting towards the lower end. And I guess that sort of is also what came out with the local water done well. Looking at the modelling was that was part of the issue that we ended up with, was that we're actually sitting. We've been so good at keeping our increases lower that we don't have the big increases projected that everyone else does, and then that's where some of the fluctuations we weren't going to be as well off from a financial point of view.
As far as this proposed charge at the moment.
Yeah.
Well, I think that this was said off the top of my head, but potentially this is what's going to be every year until we either go into the other entity or if it's a status quo. This is on this trajectory at this rate basically every year.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, obviously, as Mark said, we've done some work to find savings. We've found a whole heap of leaks that should, in theory, deliver some savings, but we won't know for 6 to 12 months what the level of those savings are. So maybe next year when we come back, we may not need to do as big an increase because we can produce the income because the savings have come through. But again, it's the nature of the beast with the water is you don't know what those savings are going to be until you've got sufficient data to be able to say.
I think that's where we're between a rock and a hard place. Is that we're getting information here now about why these charges have to increase by this much.
Yeah.
Joe and Jane blogs down the road have got none of this. All they see is the 16% rise in their water rates and are screaming at the top of their lungs that why is this happening? But whether they understand why it happens is another story. As I said, we're presented with this information here. So this is the difficult part about it, is having to tell people the reasons why these are going up so much. And you can scream at them till you're blue in the face about the fact that we're at the lower end of the thing. Yeah. It doesn't matter. No, to be so used to having these low rates makes it even more difficult. And when everything else is going up, like electricity and your other rates too, it hurts like hell. And and I feel for people having to deal with it. And there are a lot of people in here. And then I also mentioned what I said to you this morning about the debtors. Is there going to do you forecast an increase in debtors because people can't afford to pay this charge at a higher rate? So there's all of this that comes into it. It's not about me protecting my backside. It's just about me trying to explain to people why it has to be like this, and you don't get very favourable, so it's it's just
through you, Chair, totally agree, Steve, Brendan, Mark, Graham, for all your information. This is what the community needs to hear. How we go about that, there are lots of ways we can do it and have done it in the past. And I think if that could be done first before you just go and say 16% and decide it in a council meeting, that would be much more respectful to the community, and that they've got this. And I mean, it's very detailed. I'm not saying you tell them all that, but because a lot of it it's gobbledygook even for me, average person. So if that can be done, I still err on the side of maybe less of a jump just because it's a year later. Just to soften the blow a bit, with them knowing that it will increase
Mm.
maybe double because we've done less this year? Is there, that could be a happy medium, I don't know, but that's just a recommendation.
And I guess to that point, that is the point of this report, is for you to make a recommendation to council. So if you don't necessarily agree with the figures that I've put in there, and like I say, that was just a starting point, it's what I thought was the most equitable. But if you wanted to go with reduced figures there, you can make that recommendation to council. Then council has to make the decision as to, do they take your recommendation and therefore go with a slightly reduced income, which may increase your deficit, or do they override the recommendation? Override's probably not the right word, but go with the other recommendation and go with what we've suggested here. So, yeah, if you want to put a lower increase in, you are free to do that as a board in your recommendation.
Yeah, like what Joe said about communication.
Yeah.
That's the biggest taxi off the rank for me.
Mm.
Like Joe says, the average person, well, I'm below Joe on understanding financials. So, the community needs to know about the loan and how it's accumulated.
Yeah.
Like that we're not just taking money.
Yeah.
Because when I first sat on council, we bought in water meters
Yes.
under the understanding that water was going to be fair and not keep rising. And ever since we've had those water meters, it's just been going up.
Yeah.
And
Which,
people need to understand, even if we go with Waikato Water done well,
yeah,
it's going to keep going up.
Yeah.
There needs to be some of those comparisons and that communication that you've talked about, other councils. There needs to be so much.
You can't get too detailed in it.
Not
When
too
you're presenting
detailed.
that to the public,
No,
it can be done in layman's terms so
Yes.
that people get the idea. Okay,
a fact sheet that I could have and you saying you can't explain it. to
you're also
me.
going to get people to turn around and say, well, the incompetence of them letting it get to this in the first place. They're going to say, there'll be people who say that, but.
Well, there was a community board in the past that just kept deferring it,
Yes.
and then a new community board came on and actually put some money towards it. So, it is a very historic thing that's been happening.
yeah, so I guess just as a comparison, when we put the year before we put the meters in, the rates per property was $437 or thereabouts, including GST. Just a quick calculation now, based on that 1,086,000 over the number of properties there are now, it'd be $775 plus GST is what we'd be charging if we were still doing it through rates. So it was 437 including in 2018. And very quick math calculation, it would be 775 excluding GST.
That's per year though.
For the
Yeah.
yeah.
So most people are probably paying $775 per year, if not more.
I mean, if you take the 200 off, you're talking 575 at basically $2 a cube is.
Why would you take the two?
You take the 200 fixed charge off to work out the consumption. 575, and it's still 80 cube, isn't it? 575 divided by 180, 319 cube. Yeah, but it's still welcome. So most people possibly aren't for that. We do have a few big users, and obviously won't, for privacy reasons, won't go into who they are.
Yeah.
But they would be like pushing that average up, obviously, in terms of consumption, total consumption.
I mean, four bedroom. So four-person household would be lucky to use a cube a day.
Yeah.
So, I think we work on an average of about 220 litres potentially per person. So there would definitely be winners and losers in the uniform charge if it was still existent today. The small two-bedroom, two-person dwelling would be paying an astronomical amount of water to subsidise the high users. So although it's not perfect, it's sort of like the lesser of two unperfect systems, I suppose, of how the user pays. But it doesn't help solve the situation in front of us today. So
So for my brain, what is that loan that we're paying back? What was it?
It's just over $1 million off the top of my head, plus whatever was already there on the loan, which I can't.
Okay.
I'd have to look it up.
Okay, team, well, we have the staff recommendation, like what are your feelings around the room, what you want to do with it? Steve?
Oh, God. I'm more confused before than when I started. When I walked in here, my initial was, nah, I'm not recommending any rise. I understood, I had a small amount of knowledge beforehand and I walked in here and I know, and I saw these breakdowns of the cost. I understand also that information about the comparison between other councils. This is a bit, even with a rise like this year, we're still relatively better off than a lot of other people paying for water. My concern is that as it goes up, the consumption goes down because people will be saving water, then we're still back at square one to a certain degree, so we never fully ever recover from this. It's always going up. If I was going to be a fence sitter, I'd just say, okay, I recommend a rise, but it's half of what's supposed to be going. That would be my recommendation here. So I would be looking at is it the second or third option, whatever that was. Sorry.
I think it was option.
Option recommend a different increase, option 3.
Yeah.
Now, we could sit here as the community board and make this decision 7%, for example, but ultimately it's going to council. This whole conversation is going to happen again. And then we're going to have to work from that. So where do we want to work this from as far from a board's perspective? Personally, I'd like to sit in the middle here of these charges because I feel people's pain within town, but I've probably gone away from the recommending no rise, but ultimately this will be decided by council anyway. So maybe if we give them a starting point. The communication thing is very important, as you've stated. So yeah, that's where I say they recommend a different charge.
I guess my concern is that we can just keep pushing this down, and then I don't want to be the one who I don't want to be associated with in 5-6 years' time, and all of a sudden something massive comes along. In the same way we feel about our predecessors who just kept pushing it down the road, and now we're here, where we are. At the beginning, we had to declare conflict of interest. Well, in a sense, all of us got a conflict of interest because we're all having to pay water. That aside, I don't like it, but at the same time, we're a community board, and we've had quite a few of our delegations taken, and I think if we duck too much responsibility, at some stage we'll lose all our delegations. As you have said, Steve, ultimately this is going to be decided at council, and as unappetizing as it is, and it is, I just don't see that we've got the choice ultimately for in the long term. Yes, we can soften the blow now, but by softening the blow now, it seems to me that there's a good chance we are going to increase the pain of that blow down the line. And so my thought is, I don't like it in the slightest, but I think we do need to recommend to council and then let council make the final decision.
Thanks, Jeff.
Through you, Chair. My recommendation is a different increase in water charges, like Steve. I do agree, Peter, you're a total year after, something slightly lesser for this year at least, because I'm sure it's going to go up again next year. Just might soften the blow a bit, along with information out to the public, the community, Because in 7.4 here of recommended option and rationale, it says in there, these figures take into account potential water losses and will ensure that sufficient income to cover projected expenses will be recovered from the users of the water supply. We're only a couple of years away from 2027, or less than a couple of years. So, and there will be increases then as well. So if we can soften it a little bit towards that bigger increase, it's a bit like, you know, when the interest rate sort of a sudden went from 3 to 7, 8, 9, depending on if you're what type of business you might have been, or how much loan you might have had. And for people with just mortgages on their own houses, that's a big jump. So if we can just soften it a bit, that's why I recommend a different increase in water charges.
On the same page as everyone. I think this is probably one of our hardest decisions to make. And I'd like to see it not go up as much. But then if it gets passed over to another Waikato Water done well, if that's the way we go, they're not going to soften the blow. It's going to be a big jump, and it's going to be our debt because it will be ring fenced for, you know, a certain time frame. Is that correct, Mark?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
my understanding.
Yeah. If we had to get this amount of money in, I personally would like, I'm just asking for your guidance here, guys, the connection fee to be a bit more and the curb to be down. I would hate for people's kids not to have bath because they're saving water. I don't know, like, what are the connections are quite high in other places, aren't they?
Yeah,
I don't know, that's just an idea, because if we're going to recommend something else, we need to work out what we're recommending.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and that's not for me to do, that's for us to do, so, but that was just my thoughts. So we'll go back around the table, like, what is your recommendation, Steve?
I mean, based on what you've just said then, I mean, if you could keep the cubic meter charge same as it is now and increase the fixed rate, but compensate that, you know, like say a 29% rise would probably cover to a certain degree. Would that be right? But lower rate, or not, was it different depending on the consumptions? Because we could potentially lose again too. So with lower consumption.
Brendan has some software that can work that out, Brendan?
called Excel.
Yeah, because if people are conserving water because it's too much per cube, then like you say, the consumption's going to go down and we still have to treat the same amount of water. So we've still got the same costs. So we don't want people to be not using as much water.
So to keep the consumption charge the same, you'd be looking at an increase from basically $200 to $300 plus GST per fixed charge. So per quarter, that would go from $50 to 75 per 3 months. So $25 increase per.
I honestly believe that's more palatable than actually increasing both. I mean, people see both going up. It could be a little more palatable seeing that charge jumping. So the proposed is 220. So you're saying 270.
Well, it'd be $300
$300
plus GST.
Plus GST. I mean, it's probably a little easier to swallow. I mean, well, I can say that because mine's gone up to that on the White Power Water Scheme. It's near $300 every 6 months. That's $600 a year. Which has jumped 82% since 2022. So that's a massive, and I understand why it's had to happen for reasons. But I would think that would probably work better. So if we were to work that into it, perhaps it's but still have a communication around that.
Communication.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Through you, Chair, understand, just examples of, how some pay will subsidise the other. In that case, I actually don't probably find that too unpalatable, but who's going to subsidise what? So someone who owns their own house is going to subsidise someone who rents a property. And I don't totally agree from experience that people do conserve water. Being a landlord, I know that a lot of them don't conserve the water because the water bill actually comes to the owner of the property. If you're a landlord, it doesn't go direct to the people renting the property. So they, on average, unless you give them the water rate bill, they don't know about how much they're using. And when you do broach it with them, they go, oh, really? I can't have used that much. I don't know why. And so again, who's subsidising who? Same with rurally. I choose to be on a lifestyle bob, so I'm subsidising the bigger people, the bigger farms or whatever out there, you know, like you said, 3 times of what I use is the fixed charge. But yeah, if I had to be not devil's advocate, if I had to make a choice, well then maybe I would go with that, but just giving you examples on who subsidised what.
Yeah. So as just taking that $100 increase, if you were to divide that by the $1.80 per cube, it'd be about 55 cubes worth of water is the increase. So if someone increased their usage by 55 cubes, they'd be paying the same increase if you left things the same. So that shows you those lower users that probably aren't using that part are going to probably pay they would have if you went with that balanced increase. But yeah.
Just one more through you, Chair. There are a lot of elderly people who use virtually no water at all, who are also going to struggle just on any increase, let alone families. So the elderly too are struggling with things like this. I just recommend just a little bit of a decrease for this first year, just to soften the blow.
So when you say that, just in my head, like if we didn't recover what we need to and
Yes.
did a decrease, like we're not going to have any say in a couple of years' time, and it could go up $200, and then I'm just worried that we're setting. Actually, I don't know. It's up to everyone to.
Through you, Chair, if we do the education, like you said, and got it out to the community that these will rise exponentially.
Yeah.
They then, if we're constantly saying to them, could rise once it goes to Waikato Water done well.
I guess something to point out, if we go down the Waikato Water path and we transfer, part of what they have to do every 3 years is a water services strategy, which says what their pricing structure is going to be, and that actually has to go out for consultation. So I believe the public will be able to have a say in that. I think it goes to the public and not just to the councils. I can't remember off the top of my head. So there will be actually mechanisms to feed back to the entity. Hey, if they say this is how we're planning on charging, so we can go back and say, you know, this is just through council. Actually, we think you should manipulate it more this way than that way. We will have the ability to at least put that to the board. Obviously, the board will make the final decision in that case as well, if we go down that path.
I think I made this point to Vaughan from at one of the workshops there, a number of that. It gets to a point where, like electricity, you can't do anything about the price of electricity. That's just the thing. But people go out and put solar on their roofs and stuff like this, so that decreases the demand for electricity. Prices go up as well. It'll be the same with the water, as I pointed out to him. What's stopping people putting in their own tanks and collecting water off their roofs and not using much of water that's supplied to them, town water, and all of a sudden that's got to go up. You know, it's user pays thing, but it's if you're not using it, your costs don't get any, or council's costs don't get any less. That just keeps going up. So you're on a lose in a way, so.
Yeah, I mean, unless the entity, you would decide to maybe go with a fixed charge across everyone, regardless of usage.
Mm.
And then, but more like what some of the other councils still do, which is they get so many cubes free, and you pay for anything after that. That guarantees you that base income by having that fixed amount.
Mm.
And even if if you've got tanks and you're not even using the town, well, you're still paying 500-600 times a week.
Right.
That is one way to offset that potential issue, but this council hasn't gone that way, and because of the way things are going now, unless we keep water in house, we won't have the ability to go back that way. If we keep water, then obviously we can look at that funding mechanism, unless we want to do a long-term plan amendment to change our funding to 1 year, which I don't think Elizabeth has myself.
True. Yeah, fair enough. Oh, so this is, when I saw this come up on the agenda, and I was just that this is a nightmare because there's so many variables within it. It's just trying to make this decision like this is damn hard. And I feel for the people out there that are going to have to wear it. Well, we all wear it, basically. So it's not just, if you're living in this district, you wear it. So, and some people are just not in the position to be able to wear it. And that's where it hurts for them and for us having to make this decision. So it's, I'm a bit lost now, but we're on this. And, I don't know what, I think the soften the blow of it is probably the way to go, but how much do we soften it then? This is the thing. This is the next decision we're going to make. What do we recommend to soften it to? Because
Yeah, well, that's the question. What is our recommendation? If we want to
do we go in line with maybe projected rates increases so that they look the same rather than if our projected rates increases, what are we looking at this year?
For the overall district's 10.16, for the township is 16.6.
Yeah, but there you go. So we're back in the same boat, aren't we? Yeah. So, but then again, if you're aligning it, most people don't look at the town car fare.
No,
rural. They look at the overall.
Yeah.
So if you go and say, okay, overall rates rises this year 10.16, the increase in these charges are at 10.16.
And how much is that going to leave us short?
Yeah.
all right.
Sorry to do this to you, Brendan. It's just
Yes, my first question before I start trying to work all this out, are you wanting the 10.6 increase all in the fixed charge, a combination between fixed and consumption, all in the consumption? Because there'll be different calculations for each.
Through you, Chair, Brendan, I think, to be fair, you have to do it evenly because that's fair on everybody. It doesn't matter whether you're a business owner, a landlord, a rural property owner, a renter, it's all fair.
Yep. Cool.
well, looking at it, look, the current proposal is a 12.5% increase in the fixed charge and a 16.5% increase in the cubic meter rate. So if we were to increase both, then a 10.6 is still 7 or 8% lower than the actual.
Yes, it'd be 220, in my report? 225, saying 220 is 10%. 200 currently is. The 1.8, 10% on that, so the latest year, 98. So you just check that's going to be, I mean, you're going to be down obviously, but.
Yeah. But it's only, what's that, 29% of sort of those two together. And if you can get it to 22%, then it's still 7% below that, which is addresses some of the concerns of the costs, but softens the blow a bit. And if you align that along the lines of the rates, the projected rates increase, then I think people in their minds they'll see that as not a 16 or 20% jump. They'll just see it as in line with what the rates are. You understand?
So it puts you about 90K under the required income, which is not horrible.
No, we can sustain that though.
It'll just add to the deficit.
Yeah, but not to the same degree as if we recommend no.
No, exactly. And that's assuming that we don't make savings as well.
Yes, that's right. I mean, there is some potential that, like with your leak detection budget, that could.
Yeah, if we don't
You could adjust that slightly, that'll help, but not.
Yeah, and I think it's based on the assumption that the consumption will go
Goes
to,
down.
which is always the challenge.
Yeah, but what else can you do? It's consumption.
So that's, the recommendation would be connection at 220.
Yeah.
And cubic meter at 190, is that right?
198.
Would you just round it up to 2, or do you want, yeah?
Alright.
Well, it's taken a bit of getting round to it, but I'm sort of, I'm there with that. And, but also, as I'm saying, is the communication has to be an important part of this. So if we're going to go along it, so I'll go, my personal view is for the recommendation to go at that to the council, and then we can, and then it can be discussed there by everyone. Yeah, that's, fine. So that's where I stand on this.
Cool. Are you happy, Joe?
Yeah, through you, Chair, I think, yeah, recommendation of communication is key, because even if the council decide that not to go with our recommendation, a year after we've got rates increased generally anyway, and then a year after already increasing the water, they need to know why in layman's terms, so that you don't get.
I'll put it in the recommendation.
Communication is massive.
You happy, Pete? So the recommendation would be that the Ōtorohanga Community Board recommend to Ōtorohanga District Council that the 2025-26 meter water rates be set at 220 per connection per annum, GST exclusive, $2 per cubic meter of water, GST exclusive, and we'd like to add in something that the communication work on some communication now prior to the council meeting.
Yeah.
So, yeah. How's that wording? Is everyone happy with that recommendation? Mover and what? I was going to say a passer and a mover. Steve and Joe, I reckon. Thank you. Well done, guys. That's huge.
Yes.
Thank you, Brendan.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Mark. And this is a no-brainer. Welcome, Graham. Item number 39, Ōtorohanga Community Board discretionary fund. You didn't get to that item, Joe.
Well, like I'm the bearer of good news. Brendan was the bearer of bad news. So, yeah, I guess this report's probably come as a bit of a surprise to the board, but it was largely brought about by the Kapia Community Board making the same recommendation to council. So just to be consistent with what they've done. And look, previously we've told the board that we can't carry forward any operating expenditure, and that's still the case. But I think we've ended up in a situation here where the board gets to the end of the financial year, and as can be seen the case with the Ōtorohanga discretionary fund, you've still got 4,000 of your 5,000 unspent, and you're scrambling at the end of the year as to what to do with it. So it doesn't actually make a lot of sense. So the recommendation is that we carry that forward. So what it would be in the way of a carrying forward the budget. So we do a carryover report to council once a year for all our capital items that we want to carry forward. So we would just include that in that. So, for example, if you still have 4,000 unspent at the end of the year, then your budget for next year would be 9,000, which is your 5,000 plus the 4,000. So that's the recommendation that would be carried forward in that, whatever is unspent.
Thanks, Graham. I think it's a fantastic idea. Pete?
Just a question, how many years can we keep carrying it forward?
I mean, ideally, we want to be able to,
Yeah,
it's there to distribute. to
Yeah,
the
I
community,
guess,
get that,
I guess that's really at the discretion of the board, Peter, but I mean, like, I don't think really the idea of it was to build it up to its 50,000. You can build a car park or something, so it's really intended to be used during the year, but as I said to Carpia, it's a discretionary fund, so it's only a small amount of money, and the board can do really whatever they like with that. If you wanted to do like a little community project with 5,000, it doesn't have to go to an outside organisation. It doesn't have to be a grant. It's totally discretionary, and if you look at like what their discretionary fund's been used for over the years, both in Ōtorohanga and in Kapia, it's been used for a whole variety of different little things. So, but I think the idea is to use it. So you don't want to be having to. I can remember last year we were scrambling at the end of the year trying to find out what to do with the rest of the money. So it does make good sense.
Through you, Chair, I think just maybe, I think totally it's awesome that that we carry it over, but maybe we need within our own community board to have just a little bit of a template to say, where or what we could use it on, and maybe advertise it a little bit better. I'm not saying big ads out there, but talking to people in the community and encouraging them to come to a meeting and to apply for the discretionary fund. Yeah.
It's not I just reiterate, it's not a grant fund. It's not a fund where people apply to. It's a discretionary fund for the board. So you may have occasions where some people come to the board and want some money, but it's not like our other grant fund that we have, where we actually go through the whole process and there's guidelines around that. And the reason there is no guidelines is to leave it as open as possible. Yeah.
And that's grown by talking to community people, because that's how all the money in the past, since I've been on the community board for 3 years, that's how it's done, by talking to people. Yeah. And then they have to come and present.
Through Chair, do we need to make a concerted effort every year to sit down in a board meeting and discuss potential uses for that money? Rather, I think we did do that. Did we do that at the start when we met down at the church there? Wasn't there something we did? I remember at the start of the training we did that. I think that has to happen every year. What part of the year? I mean, once it's gone, it's gone. So if somebody comes to the board later on and say, well, we've distributed that discretionary fund to something else. But I think this is where we have to make that concerted effort to sit down and discuss this particularly. So then we can, then there will be no need to carry over. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I totally agree, like I said, with it being carried over. So the staff recommendation is that the Ōtorohanga Community Board recommend to Ōtorohanga District Council that any balance left in the Ōtorohanga Community Board discretionary fund as at the 30th of June 2025 be carried over to the following financial year and be included in the carryover schedule for adoption by council in September. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Steve and Pete. All in favour? Aye. Awesome, thank you. And easy peasy. No information reports. Other business has got any board updates, Steve?
No, not this. Not the stage. No.
Pete, no. Joe, no. Me, no. Board projects. Well, we're going to discuss the dog afterwards. Yes. And we've discretionary funds. No ideas about that. Resolution register. Did we have one? It's that. Right. So number 095, that the Ōtorohanga Community Board recommend to the 25-28 training Ōtorohanga Community Board to relook at the board project, the the Ōtorohanga Aurora Connectivity Trail and further options as appropriate. Staff recommend this resolution is retained in the register until the new triennium. I didn't need to read that. 102. This, the Ōtorohanga Community Board approved the removal of the 3 mealy trees located on Balance Street. This is now completed. Staff recommend this is removed from the register. Yes, yep. Okay, go. Awesome. Moving on, public excluded, nothing, and Joe is going to close us with some words, please.
So sorry, I didn't have my speaker on, I apologise. Just reading from my closing words, Māori Ora Wisdom from the Māori World. I'm talking about being broad-minded, which is whakaaro whanui. And it says a person with a narrow vision has a restricted horizon. A person with wide vision has plentiful opportunities. He rangi tā mata whā iti, he rangi tā mata whā nui. Thank you everyone for your input today.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. And our meeting is closed.